UCLA had a really, really tough schedule in 2024, but I would say 2025, it looks a little bit better. Here is that schedule, and we're going to break it down for you. First, we'll look at the non-conference. They're going to play Utah, they're going to play UNLV, and they're going to play New Mexico. Now, Utah, obviously a tough non-conference game there, but Utah wasn't great last year, so that is potentially a winnable game for UCLA, especially playing at home. UNLV going to be a tough one on the road, but I don't think UNLV, when you look at their roster and all the transfers that they've had to bring in, this is kind of a wild card team. I don't really know how good they're going to be. I don't expect them to be quite as good as last year, though. And then New Mexico going to be their easier non-conference game. So now let's look at home and away. In the Big Ten, they're going to play Penn State, Maryland, Nebraska, and Washington at home. On the road, they will play Northwestern, Michigan State, Indiana, Ohio State, and USC. So they're actually going to have 6 road games because they have 5 road games in the Big Ten, and also they have a non-conference game on the road. So usually it does not work out that way. Usually if you play, the years where you're going to have 4 home games in the Big Ten, you're going to have your non-conference games at home, and then you're going to have 5 road games in the Big Ten. Usually they kind of put those non-conference road games on the years where, again, they only have 4 conference road games. So that's, I guess, just a little bit of a challenge there, having to play 6 road games. But again, it's not too big of a deal, I would say. So that's the home and away. Let's look at who they've added this year and who they dropped off from last year in the Big Ten. So they do not play Iowa, Minnesota, Oregon, or Rutgers. 4 teams that they did play last year. They will not play any of them this year. And then you look at who they added: Maryland, Michigan State, Northwestern, and Ohio State. I would say that's a pretty good trade. Not having to play Iowa, Minnesota, and Oregon. Yes, they did add Ohio State, but Maryland, Michigan State, Northwestern, these are all teams that finish near the bottom of the Big Ten. So I think it's a pretty good trade here. Again, you can kind of cancel out Oregon and Ohio State. Then you look at the other teams. I would say Iowa, Minnesota, and Rutgers definitely better than Maryland, Michigan State, and Northwestern, and definitely in terms of where they were last year. So I'd say this is an easier schedule in the Big Ten. They also don't have to play LSU in the non-conference, but they do play Utah, and that's where they'll open things up on August 30th. Games at home. Then they'll play at UNLV on September 6th, and it's still strange to me to see UCLA versus Utah. Like, that's a non-conference game. These teams are not in the same conference anymore. I know it's been a whole year, but it still feels like the Pac-12. Like, it's just weird that there's no Pac-12. Anyways, you got UNLV on the road September 6th. Then they play New Mexico September 13th. Get their first bye week, so they'll play all 3 of their non-conference games before going into that first bye. They play Northwestern on the road September 27th. Then it's at home for Penn State October 4th. Back on the road for Michigan State on the 11th, and back home for Maryland on the 18th. And then on the road to Indiana October 25th. So what you'll notice with this schedule from top to bottom, it's home, away, home, away, home, away. The whole schedule. They don't have any back-to-back home games. They don't have any back-to-back road games. That's interesting. That's I don't know if I've ever seen that on a schedule where it worked out exactly like that. I guess that's a good thing, not having to play back-to-back road games, but it means you're basically you're home for a week and then you travel. So it's interesting. You don't have any of those stretches where you're going to be at home for 2 or 3 weeks. They'll have the bye weeks in there, so they'll have 2 weeks at home when you add in the bye weeks, but still, it's interesting, very interesting to see that schedule and see how it works out. So after their second bye week, they play Nebraska on November 8th, then they play at Ohio State November 15th, Washington at home on the 22nd, and close things out at USC on November 29th. So that's a really tough finish. I think those 4 games are going to be very tough, but you look at that middle part. For Northwestern to Indiana, there are some wins there. Northwestern potentially, Michigan State potentially, Maryland, maybe even Indiana. That's going to be, that 5-game stretch is really going to determine the season, I think, for UCLA. Of course, if they lose to Utah and UNLV in the first 2 games, they're already in trouble. But, I would say overall, that 5-game stretch right there in the middle, that's going to tell us just how good this UCLA team is. So how does this stack up with the other teams in the Big Ten? Right there in the middle. So if you look at their Big Ten conference opponents, last season they went 40-41, so a 49% win percentage. Again, right there in the middle. It's a very average Big Ten schedule, non-conference schedule. It's pretty tough when you got Utah in there and also UNLV. So overall, it's a pretty tough schedule. It's not horrible, but I would say it's definitely easier than what they had last season.